The Fairy and the Spider Queen. Once upon a time, there was a fairy. She lived inside of a giant Venus flytrap in the middle of the woods. Her life was carefree and happy. She spent her time tending to her great plant, keeping it healthy and full. When the sun peeked up and the morning dew dripped fresh, the fairy would sing a little song. It was a soft melody which only the smallest of creatures could hear. But oh, how the insects of the forest would flutter over once they heard the singing. The fairy would lull them into her flytrap to digest. There was only one shadow in her simple world. Up high in the trees lived a spider queen. She kept her web strung large and wide. Every morning the spider queen would also sing, and her voice was so lovely that it would attract the insects of the forest up to her. This meant the fairy would have to sing louder and longer to retain her prey. She wished that the Spider Queen would find another place to string up her web, but it seemed that she was more interested in stealing the fairy's haul rather than finding food of her own. At least, that was what the fairy believed. In truth, the Spider Queen knew that she could catch flies wherever she went. She was old, far older than any normal spider should be. She knew her voice was lovely enough to entice as large a meal as she desired, but it did not give her what she truly wanted. And that was the fairy herself. She saw their singing as a duet and thought of the fairy as her equal. The Spider Queen longed for the day her song was strong enough to demand the curiosity of the fairy. She fantasized about the morning when she would sing and the fairy would fly up to her web. On and on they played this little game, and the forest was filled with their beautiful song. Yet the Spider Queen remained alone in her web. Then one day, a great wind roamed over the woods. It was strong enough to make the trees bow and the birds' nests fly. It was strong enough to send the insects in all directions. It was strong enough to even lift up the fairy from the forest floor. But the Spider Queen was old. This was not her first time experiencing a wind this strong, and she knew the secret to building her web to be stronger. So instead of panicking, she waited. She waited to catch the fairy as the storm blew her up towards her trap. Once the fairy was caught, the Spider Queen wasted no time in securing her in. She tied down the fairy's wrists and ankles. She pressed her wings into the web so they were thoroughly stuck in place. Then she looked over her catch, pleased for the first time in several years. The winds had been so strong that the fairy had become unconscious. She had no knowledge of where she was or what was happening to her. Eventually, her eyes opened, and she saw how trapped she had become. The fairy cried and begged for the Spider Queen to let her go, but her pleas fell onto deaf ears. The Spider Queen had waited far too long for her prey to simply release her now. She reached down to the fairy's neck and sank her fangs into the soft flesh. The fairy's blood was the sweetest nectar the Spider Queen had ever tasted. There was the temptation to drink her fill, but she resisted. She wanted to make her catch last. Days went by, and every morning the Spider Queen would wake up and sing their song together. She encouraged the fairy to join her, but their duet never returned. The fairy became dull and colorless. She seemed to be conscious less each day. Still, the Spider Queen would bite into her neck and drink. Soon, however, the Spider Queen became sentimental. She longed for the days when she and the fairy would sing their hearts out to attract insects. Now that the fairy was trapped, she had lost all sense of life. So what purpose did the Spider Queen still have to exist? She thought perhaps it would be best to let the fairy go. Let her resume her life of tending her beloved Venus flytrap. Then they could continue their duet, and the Spider Queen would enjoy herself once more. Yet when the Spider Queen went to unbind the fairy, she discovered that her prey was dead. Where once she had found joy and desire, now lay only an empty husk. And that was all the Spider Queen's doing. She had no one to blame for this but herself. She knew she could just pick up and go to another forest. She could start her life over. But what would be the point? Fairies were rare to come upon, and there was very little chance that she would find another like the one she had lost today. The Spider Queen looked down to the forest floor, where her fairy's beloved Venus flytrap lay open. Its jaws were pointed and slick. Its mouth was wide, as though inviting her in. The Spider Queen found the call too difficult to resist. She took one last look at the fairy's corpse and gave its cheek a light kiss. Then she leapt from her web and down into the flytrap. The last thing she saw before it clamped shut was the sight of the fairy, alone in her web.